Hello and welcome to the Free Associates. That's right, folks, the Free Associates, the freedom of association, the freedom to associate with any idea or anything that comes across our path. Because you know what? Freedom is just like pretty good, although when it isn't, and then freedom isn't good anymore, and then we'll rename the show. But until that magical, mystical moment, we're going to try to let everything in. We're going to try to be absorbent, and we're going to try to just like enter this conversation as the amateurs that we are, and exit the conversation as probably even more amateur than when we started, because it's very hard to know anything. These things are so vast. We're literally floating. We're like flotsam and jetsam on this giant ocean of knowledge and information and data that's coming in. And Waylon and I, less our guests seem like they're swimming, but Waylon and I just kind of float on our backs and drink our beer, basically. Is that what we're doing? And so if you're listening on the radios, WMUA Amherst, we're so glad to have you. This is a rebroadcast from the day before when we're on Facebook Live. Now we have the Free Associates page on Facebook Live, or Facebook rather, and we also have our own webpage, the freeassociates.us. And look at this awesome card. Now you guys know, if you've been watching, that I designed. No, I'm not hypnotizing you yet, Waylon. I'm just showing them the awesome card I had made days before.
That's the Pavlovian response over here. You flash it up, and all of a sudden it's like one of those venomous snakes.
I'm gonna hypnotize Waylon now. Okay, I'm just gonna get the light just right. Waylon, you will do everything I tell you to do on this show. Even though you have the controls over there, I am controlling your simple mind. Boom, Waylon is now mine. He thinks he's in control, folks, but yeah, he doesn't even know that's happened. Isn't that spooky? So we've been doing a series from Politico, and they're short pieces, and we've been looking at them. I thought yesterday's conversation was really good. I got very excited. But there are other times where I just leave really angry. What did you think yesterday's conversation? Are we going to run for office again on the direct representation line, Waylon?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's steamroll the competition over here. Let's do
2022, man. I actually have a neighbor whose oldest son is a real tech expert on this subject, so I'm going to try to get him on the Zoom.
Nice.
Anna, how are you doing over there in
Washington, D.C.?
Washington, right. D.C. But you're a Brooklyn person.
Yes,
that's displaced.
Yes.
How has it been treating you?
D.C.?
Yeah, just like getting out of New York and.
Yeah. I mean, it was intense, and I feel very conflicted about it because I know how intense it is in New York and how a lot of people have left, the whole white flight thing from New York.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I guess I'm part of that, which I'm a little ashamed of, but I'm here with my parents, and I'm happy to be here with my parents. And Ham's parent, my husband, lives in DC too, or grew up here, so his parents are here, so we're able to be together. And his sister actually lives here too, so her kids are here, and our kids are getting to see their cousins more than they ever do normally. So all of that is really kind of a blessing. And but yeah, it's weird. It's
weird. Yeah. But everybody's got to take care of themselves in some way or another. And you have kids, and this is just the way it is right now. I'm hoping that things are starting to calm down, but in New York and in general, we might be looking at the peak right now and then coming back down. So I'd be curious. I had a fond memory of you from all those years ago when we were up at Marcata Studio, and I was filming the Pussycats documentary. You remember that?
Yeah.
And I remember that was the first time we really connected well, and that was like 2005 or something like that. And then there were all these creme de cows. Everyone was drinking creme de cow, and we recorded Loop to Loop that night. It was a lot of fun. So it's funny to think about, time's passing. And ever since 2000, the world has seemed different. Y2K was real. That was actual. Like, that happened. It didn't happen the night of New Year's, but nothing's been the same since Y2K.
I remember exactly 2005. That's dating yourself. I remember Y2K. I remember I thought the world was going to end. I was in middle school, and I made out at midnight with this girl because we thought the world was going to collapse around us. So it was nice.
Good for you.
It was a good angle.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now, Waylon, did you actually think the world was going to end?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
I thought my Nintendo 64 might not work for some reason.
Yes.
That it didn't connect to the internet, but that was about it.
Planes would be dropping out of the sky and your Nintendo wouldn't be working. So that would be tough, definitely.
Was there any fallout from Y2K?
What's that?
there anything that happened? Did anything happen? I remember nothing happened, but
yeah,
like,
a lot of programmers got rich. Let me tell you that much. A lot of people made money off of that. But, it was one of these, again, you can't make this stuff up. When they were designing computers, they put the prefix 19 before every year in every program. Like, computer scientists couldn't anticipate the year 2000 when they were writing their programs. And they wanted to save on memory. So they're like, why don't we just make this 19 every time? And then
there has to be more to it than that. I think it was some binary thing where it was like the next year, but
no. My parents are computer scientists, and that's what it was. They were just like, we'll never reach the year 2000.
That's why Prince made the song "Party Like It's 1999."
That's what it is. But listen, ever since then, you had the election of 2000. How crazy was that? You had the housing crisis. Obama gets elected. No one saw that coming. Trump, pandemics. I'm telling you, Y2K happened. All right. Now, before I get too spooky, do you guys want me to read the piece we're going to do today?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So this is called The Rules We Lived It By Won't All Apply. Astra Taylor is a filmmaker and author of Democracy May Not Exist, but We'll Miss It When It's Gone, which I just think is a great title. America's response to the COVID pandemic has revealed a simple truth. So many policies that our elected officials have long told us were impossible and impractical, were eminently possible and practical all along. In 2011, when Occupy Wall Street activists demanded debt cancellation for student loans and medical debt, they were laughed at by many in the mainstream media. In the intervening years, we have continued to push the issue and have consistently been told our demands were unrealistic. Now, we know that the rules we have lived under were unnecessary and simply made society more brittle and unequal. All along, evictions were avoidable. The homeless could have been housed and sheltered in government buildings. Water and electricity didn't need to be turned off for people being late on their bills. Paid sick leave could have been a right for all workers. Paying your mortgage late didn't need to lead to foreclosure, and debtors could have been granted relief. President Donald Trump had already put a freeze on interest for federal student loans, while New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has paused all medical and student debt owed to New York State. Democrats and Republicans are discussing suspending collections on or outright canceling student loans as a part of a larger economic stimulus package. It's clear that in a crisis, the rules don't apply, which makes you wonder why they are rules in the first place. This is an unprecedented opportunity not just to hit the pause button and temporarily ease the pain, but to permanently change the rules so that untold millions of people aren't so vulnerable to begin with. All right. I like that. I mean, I think it's an interesting piece. Obviously someone with a sense of humor. Anna, what do you, and I don't mean that in a kind of sarcastic way. Anna, what's your thoughts on that piece? First thoughts.
I mean, I definitely, it rings it just resonates with me a lot because as soon as this happened, I watched, and we all watched, as over the course of very few days, things started to fall apart so quickly. And the speed with which our system can disintegrate is just it's so alarming.
Yeah.
And it feels unnecessary, like she's pointing out in this article. It does feel so arbitrary and stupid the way that we have things arranged that hang together so thinly, and it's like a house of cards. And so it makes you think about every aspect of it. And exactly like she's saying, I worked at a financial market research firm for like 10 years, and I knew nothing about finance when I started working there. And it's a very foreign sort of world to me, and I did video production and audio production for them. But I learned as I went, and Occupy Wall Street was right outside our window. And I remember the attitudes of the people that worked at the firm that I worked in about that. And they were like, ugh, those Occupy Wall Street people and the noise, and they don't even have a point. And it was just completely, these were supposedly liberal people that I was working with too. And they just
yeah,
it's, that was the way that they saw it. And not one of the people that I worked with could actually articulate what they expected to happen in the future with this idea of like perpetual growth. Mm-hmm. And that's what the entire financial system is dependent on. And so I feel like those two worlds, it was just like amazing to look out the window and see all these people. I would go out there to Zuccotti Park and see that going on, and then go up into this, this firm. And anyway, but so yes, I think she makes incredible points, and I wish that it was amazing how quickly we went into immediately socialist kind of policies instantly.
Yeah.
So when the emergency happens, you can suddenly do it.
Yeah, right. Well, that's right. I think that's the point. I mean, that perhaps I'm sure she's aware of that, but you have to have the political will to do it. Is partly
Yeah.
that. Without an emergency, or people won't let you do it. They won't allow, and not just like socialism, but command economy stuff. Where we're telling Ford Motors what to do. Like that's command economy. It's like wartime footing. It's probably not
Yeah.
lengthy, but Waylon, what are your thoughts here, pal? I can see you chomping at the bit over there. Oh.
I think that you need. I mean, the rules of the game are the rules of the game until the game changes. And we've seen some game changers. We've seen some game changers when it comes to the 2008 financial crisis, and we can talk about how we got into that mess because of deregulation and just an unregulated financial matters. But this is a game changer. This is life is not normal. And so you need to do stuff that are extreme measures. I think that after that this happens, we're going to go right back to the way that society was functioning. I think that hopefully we'll be able to extract some of those positives and to see that there can be some sort of forgiveness or a leniency on some of the things that Americans struggled with before all of this happened. They struggled with catching up with their debts. They struggle with paying their mortgages. They struggle with these things. And a system that is not forgiving is a system that needs a little bit more leniency. And we've seen that in this extreme case, there's a lot of help. But you also need to go back to those rules. You can't just throw all those out the window and go into a society in which is a totally new society. Or at least I don't think that we're going to head in that direction, because I think that we're taking measures right now which are pretty drastic measures that need to happen. But at the same time, if we were to operate under the assumption that we could always every month send a $1,200 check to individuals, and aside from that, I've read this article today, sending $1 million to certain individuals, it's just not sustainable. And so we need to center everything back when all said and done, is my opinion.
So Anna, this is the whale dog's, what I would like to call the ricochet effect. He believes that
I zig when everybody zags.
Oh, I'm not even talking about that, my friend, although you are a zigzagger. But I'm talking about, he thinks the minute COVID is passed, everyone's going to be rushing back to absolute status quo normal. And I just think you're wrong.
Applebee's will be packed.
Applebee's will be packed. It's funny because I was actually watching, I pulled up a bunch of big truck videos for my son, Rockwell. By the way, my son, Rockwell, loves it when I say, digger truck. Like, he loves that voice. He just loves it. But one of the things that popped up, which was amazing, was this cruise ship being built in this giant hangar. And there was like hundreds of people. And I was just thinking, there's a bunch of people who are not going to be working for a little while. I mean, I just do not think, Waylon, you are anticipating that certainly there's like emergency stopgap measures going on, but the amount of diminished consumer, what do they call it, service industry stuff is going to be big. It's going to be big, in my opinion. I don't think people are
just to clarify, you're saying that when we come back from this, there's going to be a certain significant percentage that will never come back again?
I don't think never. Never is not the word I would use. It's going to
slowly come back over the span of what? Are we talking months, years?
Could be years for the economy. First of all, the economy was cruising into trouble before this happened. Like, there were a lot of indicators, one of them being wealth inequality.
Yes.
Yeah, Anna, can you talk to that, or are you with me, or are you with Waylon on this one?
I mean, I do fear that things would go exactly back to how they were. I don't want that to happen, and I see this as an opportunity, like many people do, to reset things in a better way. But yeah, I think we have the tendency to go back to the way we were. Like after 9/11, I thought for a while things were really going to change, and they did. It felt different in New York for a while after 9/11. And then it sort of slowly crept back to the way everything used to feel. So I hope that doesn't happen with this, but I do think we are majorly in need of rethinking capitalism. Mm-hmm. And that this could, I was thinking this could really jumpstart that conversation and make that, I don't know. I honestly, I want to think that it will change things, but I'm not sure that it will.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at too. And I'm kind of like, I don't want things to change so much. Like it's kind of like landing a plane.
Yeah.
goes like that, like that could be cataclysmic. I don't want things to be cataclysmic, but maybe like you, and I think like Waylon, I don't want to box Waylon out of this. I would. There's some really structural problems that are like that have been going on really since the 90s, since Glass-Steagall was repealed and other things.
Well,
you know. Go ahead, Waylon.
Sorry. The problem that we're faced with right now is that this is a great experiment in a more kind of democratic socialist environment. There's certain measures that we're taking that we are addressing, hopefully shifting some of the burdens that the middle and lower classes have had, because now everything's been exacerbated by the crisis, and we're shifting gears and hopefully addressing some of those things. The thing that is unfortunate about that, if you are somebody that is saying that this could be a dry run for change, is that it's an experimentation during a time in which it never occurs again. So hopefully you could have this situation as an experiment. We can both see this as an experiment in a dry run for some radical, in my opinion, beneficial change. But at the same time, you can't go out to eat, and you can't go get a beer at the bar. And so what I think is going to happen, and just to articulate my point, is that we're going to slowly go back into society, and we're going to get right back into the old rhythm of things, and these temporary measures are going to go away, and we're going to have this kind of short-term memory of how things were in a time that was a outlier on the system.
I want to come back to something that you said before, which Jeremy, was that you think that we can't afford to pay people $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month, whatever. The $1 million, obviously, we can't afford to do, but Andrew Yang thinks that we can do that. You know what I mean? That was his whole thing, was pay people. And I mean, I have thought about that a lot, and I don't know what you guys think about that as a concept. It sounds pretty interesting to me, but I'm very interested in what motivates people, you know what I mean? And whether it takes away your motivation to be given things or not, and how, you know, most of the sort of really rich people that I know, it can be a real problem if your kids, you know, are given money or too soon in their life, and that kind of thing. Like that can really badly, negatively affect people. I would say probably rich kids are lazier than anybody else when it comes to that kind of thing, when it comes to handouts, you know? But so, according to Andrew Yang, it wouldn't demotivate people to be given that money, and actually we could afford to do it.
Well, here's the thing, and Anna, I've thought a lot about this. I think he's a smart guy. I really have an allergic reaction to guaranteed income. I feel like it's Silicon Valley's solution for like work going away. But like work is such an important aspect of American life. Americans are workers, like to their core. It's basically a nation of workers. We're not Italians or Greeks. You know, we cannot transition to bocce. Like this is how we define so much of our identity, is that we work. You know, and I'd actually, just to say, I don't think rich kids are lazy. I think that there's conditioning there, just like with a lot of people, that removes them from that really important engine of work and drive. You know, I think that, you know, and I'm just saying like it's so key. In America's only shared belief system is labor. That's the only thing that's left. So the idea of guaranteed income, I'm like, you guys, you're going to have to do better than that, because people need to work, I don't know, or something, or join my cult, you know?
I guess when I was talking about rich kids being lazy, I think that there's often an accusation of people who are poor being lazy if they have to be on welfare. And so that's just juxtapose that.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think that actually my grandmother gave me and my siblings a like thought experiment for Christmas one year. Instead of a present, she made us write an essay on laziness. And,
ho, ho, ho.
Yeah, exactly.
Merry Christmas.
And, you know,
you copied and pasted it.
And I copied and pasted it. Yeah. But I actually argued, and I think I still believe this, that laziness doesn't really exist. I think that you like you were saying, like most people want to be productive. They want to contribute. And if they're quote unquote lazy, it's because they lack confidence. It's because they hate themselves. It's because, you know what I mean? Like there isn't any really true such thing as that.
Yeah.
but I think people want to be motivated, and that's what interests me most about this idea of distributing income to people, or handouts of any kind, or not, or like thinking that because you're struggling and it sucks and it's horrible and you have to pay more than you can afford for healthcare, is that good? Yeah, it really motivates you. It really motivates me. I would say that not knowing where my next meal is coming from is probably the most motivating thing that's ever happened to me. You know what I mean? Like when I had to live on my own and had to figure it out. That made me do it. Would I be able to do it without that motivation? I don't know.
Well, that's a great question. Can you have growth without anxiety? Like we talk about anxiety if it's just like a totally bad thing, but there's okay kinds of anxiety that push you to do things because that you wouldn't do, that you have to choose between a lesser anxiety or evil and this one. And so you go out, you go and knock on that door because you're more anxious about not working. I had that when I moved to Western Mass. Yeah. I ended up taking a very anxiety producing job, but I was more anxious about not working.
Yeah, exactly.
So one anxiety was pushing me to work. Yeah, Waylon.
I would have to disagree with the laziness point, and I'm not even talking. And this is why. I think that laziness is something that it can affect everybody of every single race, creed, socioeconomic circumstance. I think that I think that it's stereotypically, the narrative has been that poor people are lazy, but deep down, I think that if given the opportunity to become complacent, certain individuals will take advantage of that situation.
They'll tend to that more than others. Okay.
They'll tend to that more than others. And I mean, just looking at how, like, let's go the exact opposite direction of stereotypical of poor being lazy. Go the opposite direction. The hedge funds, kind of like what you were saying, the rich hedge fund kids that don't have to work ever in their lives. And the idea of they're not really doing anything in the sense of their money is in the stock market and they're collecting capital gains on these and they're living nice, but are they motivated to do things? Well, I'm not saying, like you said, the majority of individuals are motivated to do things and grow and progress as an individual and members of society. But to what extent, and again, across the entire socioeconomic spectrum, do you cater to lazy people? And to what extent can you say we can afford to we're going to give X amount of money to everybody in society, but if there was a scientific definition of laziness, 10% of those, 5% of those are going to be not contributing to society. So to what degree would we allow laziness? And to what degree do you abandon that? And so it's just something you have to think about. I mean, aside from the idea that it's going to be the last 5 weeks, we're talking about economic doom that's going to cost us $2 trillion in a bailout of everybody top down in our United States. Andrew Yang's plan was something like 2.8 or 3 trillion a year. So we would have another COVID crisis like every single year, and thinking about how to pay for a $2.8 trillion deficit with that. So just bringing it back, just honing everything in, I think that the idea that you're giving, that individuals are getting kind of this universal basic income, and again, just going back to the rules changing forever, if we were to establish that as a rule changing forever, there's some really big issues that we need to address after that. So what happens to the social programs that we have? What happens to individuals that may really need more than $1,200, just as an example, and people that really don't need $1,200? And so,
and there's solutions for that. I mean, that's what policy is.
Okay, so what are the solutions?
I'm not gonna get into the solutions right now. I have them, but
yeah, exactly.
No, but listen, I think we have to be careful that, and this is kind of what the article is saying. Like, you have to be careful. It's not to be so status quo that you have to, if you throw me a bunch of problems and say, well, you have to figure this out and you have to figure that out. Yeah, you have to everything has to be figured out. But one way to figure things out is to roll things forward and figure them out. It's not, I'm just, I'm not necessarily for guaranteed income,
Yeah.
by the way. And if I can just make a little advertisement, which is there's other ways to fix society that if you work, you should be able to afford living in America. Okay. You should not have to be on food stamps if you're working 40 hours a week. And a lot of people are. That's like corporate welfare. That's allowing the minimum wage to be too low. You should not have to beg to get medical care when someone in your family's dying. It's gross and disgusting. There has to be tort reform in this country. Lawsuit lawyers are ruining America to a great extent. All of these things are dysregulated, non-regulated things that are destroying America.
I guess what I would say what I would say here, and just bringing it back to will the rules change forever? I hope that all the rules don't change forever. The way that we see them right now, we go back to a status quo. We analyze the things that worked and the things that didn't, and we focus on the incremental steps, because again, we're working in bureaucracy. Incremental steps that will do this in a budgetarily sound way. I hope that we start looking at universal health care. I think that that's the first step before we start looking at $1,200 paychecks to everybody or this, that, the other thing. I hope that we start thinking about what our priorities are, and hopefully we've seen that COVID and the appreciation of life is a real, ideologically sound thing in our country. But I hope that things don't change forever as the drastic steps that we changed. We go back to some sort of status quo, and we take the good things that happened, and we can realize that.
Don't worry, Cumberland Farms will stay open. Listen,
yep.
Hannah.
I don't have it.
And by the way, no one's arguing for guaranteed income here, right?
I know we really got stuck on that. I'm sorry, but
that's okay. You might be, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Do you understand my problem with it?
Yes, I completely do. I think that as I've heard it explained, and I truthfully haven't studied it enough to know, but it sounds like from what I heard Andrew Yang talking about it, that it isn't meant to replace your entire income. And It would be meant to, because in most places, $1,000 a month is not going to make you a living. Mm-hmm. But it supplements what you have, and it makes it so that you can actually survive. And part of it, you're right, it better yet to pay people an actually living wage. Yeah. And I would say that in a lot of cases, $15 an hour is not even anywhere near enough. That's right. So I think that I actually try to do this is another sort of thought experiment, but if you had only 3 people in the world, and you lived in on a plot of land or something like that, and you had your little house, and you're like, I could really use help from this person to do this job. But really, if you had just 3 people in the whole world, would you really feel okay giving that person something anywhere less than what it would, would your time ever be more valuable than that person's time? That's what we're saying when we pay somebody less than we make, or if we, you're just saying whatever it is that you're doing is not worth as much as whatever it is that I'm doing, because we all have the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So that's really weird to value I understand there's educational differences, and you've worked harder to gain your degrees and things like that. So I guess you have to build in some differences in this, but it doesn't ever make sense for it to be where it is.
And also, by the way, Waylon, let me just jump in. Conceivably, education shouldn't be the factor on which who gets paid more. It should be how unpleasant the work is.
Yeah, true.
Right there. So Planet Money, go listen to the best podcast of all time. But Norm, you would have loved today's episode. It was how it's life versus the cost of COVID. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it looks at, and this is the actual government does this through policies from seatbelts to the warning labels on flammable substances. A certain individual's life is worth X. The cost of implementation cost Y. X is greater or less than Y. So the example that they gave, what I was talking about, was the idea of flammable labels. The government used this formula at first that was one life equals $300,000, because the only thing that they looked at was the output of how much the individual would make on the average if they died at whatever. Yeah. So their calculation was X. The labels were Y, and the labels ended up costing more. We didn't have labels. They went back, they revised the formula, and long story short, the cost of a human life as lost by COVID is $10 million. That's what it is currently. The cost of shutting down the government for X amount of days / months, the cost in the actual economic terms of human life is so much more. It's like $14 trillion versus shutting down the government, which it has cost us $2 trillion, and we'll see it's probably much more than that because of the economic. We still haven't crunched the numbers, but there is this certain idea of economics that play even when it comes to just life and the risks that we're taking. And they actually calculated the risks of that based on, you should get more if you're a healthcare worker whose life is at risk because you're constantly interacting with individuals that may be exposed to COVID, hence you might die. There should be a higher pay for a police officer. There should be a higher pay for a firefighter who may be going out. So the idea that equal pay and equal time equals equal work, there's so many variables there, and I wouldn't say necessarily that. And again, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody that is, for instance, a cashier at risk, but the thing that I would say is that all jobs are not equal, and time is not equal at each job. We've gone to the point where our, like CEO pay and everything is totally crazy, and we could go there, but not all work is equal, is what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let me ask you, Anna, if I can, what's a rule that you want to question coming out of this that could be really pedestrian, but like kind of something that like you've accepted before as a mom and as a wife and as a worker and all these things that you would be like, you know what, I'm not doing this after this. Like, I'm not talking about guaranteed income necessarily or anything big. Yeah. Is there something, and you can marinate on this in a second, but because Robin and I have been talking about like, well, what's our life going to look like after this? Like, what things are we going to, do we really want to just jump right back in? Because I actually don't really want to jump right back in right now. No. Do you have anything that you would change and be like, are you questioning living in New York long term?
Yeah. I absolutely am. Yeah. No, I definitely am. And I think the thing I think about the most is just like the time I spend with my kids and how I spend a lot of time in New York rushing and not paying attention to them as much as I would like to. But I think that's true of anywhere for any parent who works. Yep. I mean, I don't think that would necessarily change, but I do find myself loving the fact that they're home, even though it's difficult to homeschool them and work at the same time. It's very hard to get it done, but I love seeing them more, and I want to simplify our lives a lot more. And I don't want to go back. Like you're saying, like I definitely don't want to go back in many ways to the way we were living before. So yeah, I talked about that yesterday. We were talking about what if we just moved out of New York? I think a lot of people will. And
Do you think a lot of people will?
Yeah, and
I was wondering that. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of wonder. I mean, I wonder what that will do to the value of the, house that we have, and like I wonder about what's going to economically. Like I have no idea what's going to happen after this, and there's some changes that I would definitely welcome, and even if it's to the detriment of us financially, you know what I mean? Like we should probably
right.
Yeah. And that's okay. But like if I would trade a lot for better quality of life now more than ever before. Like I feel like that's pretty solidified in my mind.
That's cool. And I don't think you're unusual on that. I think a lot of people, because what we have here is a combination of like, whoa, life is short. Yeah. Like there are real threats out there. And now we've been brought to a pause where we really kind of are with each other. I was kind of dreading it a little bit. I thought this is going to be the longest snow day of my life. But, after about a week, I'm like, we're having fun. Yeah. And we have a lot of fun. And I do not have a stressful life. You can always move in our studio back here. We'd love to have you here. Like, you should move here. Let's get you up here. Waylon, is there anything that you'll do differently? I know the answer is no. Go ahead and try to answer that. Waylon's
no, like, I totally agree.
Waylon's going to be like, I want to interrupt you. Waylon's going to be like, one rule that I'm going to do differently is I'm going to get the 36-ounce iced coffee after this because
so I have to go out less. No, I mean, I actually entirely agree with you. I think that we're going to see resurgence of suburban sprawl. I think that because we're like, wow, we are like, just the awareness of being like, wow, we're way too close to each other, like in all aspects of what's going on. And two, because we've understood that we can do a lot of things remotely. So I think that that's going to cause suburban sprawl. But at the same time, that's a movement of the middle class. There's a lot of people in this. We've also understood that there's a lot of people that can't afford a move such as that. So I agree on those premises. Again, I think that what people are yearning for is a return to normalcy. And that can be either intentionally or unintentionally construed as a return to the status quo. And so that's why I always come back to the center. That's why I'm always like, things are going to return to normal, even if we don't want them to, because what normal was not us having to, like, I'm drinking beers tonight with my friends over Zoom and doing trivia. Like every Thursday, I get to hang out with them at Arizona Pizza Company down the road. I want to do that, and the minute that I can, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's how a lot of people also are thinking as well.
I get it.
If they have the money to do so.
I get it. Although, by the way, if the middle class or upper class leaves the cities, that's going to be really hard, actually, on the employment levels in the city that remain, because so much of those are service jobs. I mean, you can't even do the math on this, but I'm going to hypnotize you, Waylon, so that you can take over. And you are now about to cue music as I get the light on the. Why is it so hard?
Music.
Cue music. Well, you've spent another little bit of time.
I'm not hypnotized yet, buddy.
About it. Just cue the music. I can't get it right. Anna, thanks so much for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate
you.
Yeah,
super cool.
You guys are awesome. And Robin is just like, I talked to Anna today. And she's like doing cartwheels. She just loves talking with you.
I love talking to Robin.
And give that ham bone a big hug for me, okay? Yeah. And guys, and thanks Whale Dog for all the work that you're doing. And this has been the Free Associates. We have our Facebook page. You may be listening to WMUA Amherst, and we have the freeassociates.us. We're going to keep plowing through these political predictions. I feel a little bad because these predictions were made like 8 weeks ago. The Politico obviously gave their writers like, we need this in an hour, and they're like, oh. Now here we are 8 weeks later, being like, this guy's an idiot.
Makes my job easy. I just go, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change.
Well, we'll see. It's all recorded and will never be lost. So predictions are dangerous. Anyways, thanks so much for joining us on the Free Associates, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.